Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another Social Blueprint interview. Well, friends, today we are joined by somebody in the community who may be more recognized, Michael Klinger, than some other people out there. But what we're really going to focus on is transitions, lifestyle, and all those learnings that we can take in our everyday lives. And I'm so thrilled to be joined by Michael to discuss all. But everybody, just before we get to the interview itself, I just want to highlight here at the Social Blueprint, we are a true resource to the entire Melbourne community and the Sydney community as well. There's so many different ways that you can sort, find services, find all those things that you need. And we are also an events calendar. And in short, we are so much more than just interviews, and it's all for free. All you need to do is sign up. And now we'll take it over to Michael. Hey, Michael, I personally don't like doing interviews in chronological order, but I have to ask, and a big shout out to Danny, your brother. He remembers that when you were very little, just a real intensity to your being and cricket. And my question to you is, do you remember those times?
Yeah, I think not only cricket, probably any sport. I think I drove my mum and dad crazy, probably Danny and my sister Lisa as well, with balls getting thrown and hit against the wall, whether it was cricket, whether it was tennis, whether it was throwing the ball and catching. I was pretty relentless there and non-stop. Yeah.
Right. And I'm curious, did you find it as a kid, and I'll get to why I'm asking these questions later on, as certainly you must have noticed that you were different than other kids out there, maybe not only by your skill level, which is to some degree a gift of God, but also that intensity that you said you brought to the table. Did you find that empowering or isolating, or can you just talk about that will to succeed?
Definitely not isolating. I think it was more just I loved it. I enjoyed. So, I had my dad and my brother who used to play with me all the time, whether it was cricket or footy in the backyard. I've got a young, 6-year-old now who's doing the same, and I think back I think back how patient my brother and Danny and Lisa as well were in those situations and playing with me for hours out on the field. So now I think I'm getting some of that medicine back with my youngster.
Yeah, are there some times when you're like, no, not just another one?
Yeah, at times, and I think back to when I was a kid doing the same thing and how much they supported me. So wherever possible, I never say no, and I always take my youngest and the other kids out to play in the backyard. But it's I think it was one, I did it because I really enjoyed it. I had people, my family supporting, and even to the next extent where my mum and dad used to drive me hours to country areas to play. Once I started playing rep level at cricket, when I was younger, so the support obviously helped as well.
Right, and as I said, the theme for today is really about transitions. Can you just tell us, in schooling, did you ever move schools for cricket?
No, I went to Mount Scopus from little kinder. I was at Q campus till grade 2, and then grade 3 to year 12 in Build. I had an opportunity once or twice to move to a private school who offered wanted me to play in the APS sport system, which is a Saturday morning sport. Which at times it's a development level where you get picked to play representative level. But I was lucky that at a young age I was already playing for a Premier Cricket club, which helps you get through those pathways to play at state level. So I didn't take up those offers at other private schools. I was happy at Mount Scopus. I was with my friends, and I had all my elite sport and elite training either before or after school and weekends. So that was enough for what my goal was at the end.
And so then I guess take us through that stage where you stopped at school and you became a professional player. Was that all in Melbourne?
Yeah, so growing up I got chosen for under 17s Victoria, under 19s Victoria, 3 years of Australian under 19s, where I was lucky enough to tour some amazing places. We went to Pakistan as a 16-year-old. Before at that stage it got too dangerous and you couldn't go there. Now teams are going back there again. I went to South Africa and England 3 years in a row with the Australian under 19 team, and then while I was in year 12 was the first year I got a professional contract with Cricket Victoria, and that was my 1st of July that year was when I started my professional career.
Wow, it's incredible. So you were moving around a lot of travel. I'm curious, those experiences, how did they shape you? Did it make you nervous, excited? Because obviously you were still spending a lot of time outside the house.
Yeah, no, I certainly embraced it. I think my parents were probably more nervous than me.
As a parent, I could assure
some of the countries we were traveling to, but no, I certainly embraced it. I just saw it as a stepping stone, to be honest, from where I wanted to get to as a professional cricketer when I was traveling with the under-19 side, and I saw it as an opportunity to perform well, and then that gets me noticed to play for my state, Victoria, and the way it turned out, it worked that way. And then I was lucky enough. My first year in the States with Victoria, I didn't play. I was only I was 17, turning 18 that year.
Right.
And then I was in the squad, and then started playing the year after.
Understood. Now, at the time, most of your friends, I assume, were going to uni at that stage?
Yeah, year 12 in uni. Yeah.
Okay. So I know that you're a lifelong learner, but you were not necessarily in that classroom situation. Can you just tell us, you really, and we'll get to it later again, transitioned your career around. Did you always have a sense, even at this stage, that you needed to do some type of professional development, some type of academia, because at some point the cricket is going to come to an end?
Yeah, 100%. Had to make a lot of sacrifices sort of at 17, 18 onwards, because, missing your mate's 18th birthdays, missing your 21st, missing some weddings, and, as it went on further, because whether it's playing professionally, traveling, training, whatever it was, and I committed to doing that as a career.
Right.
Yeah, but certainly I always knew that cricket may not work out. It may not be a professional career for me forever. And even if it was worked out, the best case scenario where it was for long term, you still probably have 40. Somewhere between 20 to 40 years of work after that I had to make sure that I was ready for. So I certainly made sure I prepared well. I took a year off to go to the Australian Institute of Sport, was at the Cricket Academy.
Okay.
Straight after school finished, and then from there I started studying an undergraduate course and in sports science, and then throughout my cricket career, I always knew that I wanted to have something more substantial behind me.
Okay.
And decided to study a Masters in Business and Sport Management, which is a two-year course. It took me 10 years to chip away at it, but I didn't fail anything. It just took me a long time because I was travelling to the UK and to play, but finally got there, which was great, and that's helped me set up my career from post-cricket.
Yeah, and I'm curious, as far as other professionals who are in that, let's just say early 20s, they feel like it's never going to end at that stage there. Any words of advice to them about taking up, because there are opportunities out there for them? What would you say to them?
Yeah, definitely. In a professional sporting environment, you have the resources to do it, whether it's player associations, is normally always a PDM, which is a professional development manager, who works with the sports, whatever sport that is, if it's at a professional level. So I'd certainly, I couldn't emphasise the importance of doing something away from your professional sport for two reasons. One, it obviously helps you set up post-career, because a career could get cut short, whether it's performance or injury or whatever that might be, and you got a lot of time after that to work to set yourself and your family up. The other side I found, and whenever I was doing some study, even if it was part-time, I always performed better, because it took my mind off actually the stresses of playing. So I could go home, if I had to do an assignment or do some reading, it actually allowed me to switch off, and that was really helpful, because I see me during other times or other players, and particularly now, in my current role since I've been finished playing. So many people take home with them, what happened to them on the field that day. And I think that can be really debilitating, because that's all they think about 24 hours. So I found it really...
Guilty,
I found it really mentally refreshing, actually, doing study or, outside of that professional career.
And is that a skill, that ability to switch off, switch on deliberately? Is that something that you feel you still use to this day?
Yeah, I do. As you mentioned, guilty sometimes of not doing it well enough. I think because I'm aware of it, I actually know when I'm not doing it, and you try and sort of kick yourself back into shape. Whether that's spending time with being more present with the kids when you're home, or whatever that might be, if you have something else on your mind. But it is hard in certain roles, like my current role at the moment, and I'm working with overseas, and I can be getting phone calls early mornings, nights, so it's hard to completely switch off. But I think just making sure that you find moments where you are fully present with what's happening around you.
Right. And I suppose maybe we're jump around here a little bit, but these lessons that you learn on the field, and this is a case of learning it on the field / off the field, I personally feel that they're so critically important for life skills. Do you feel the same as far as you see the transitions and how you're able to use those same not obviously how to hit a ball per se, but just how to manage people, how to manage a team? Some of your teammates, let's face it, you like some better than others. Have you found those skills completely applicable today as well?
Yeah, 100%. It's there's a lot of skills that relate to all areas of life that you learn as a professional sports person, and I was lucky enough when I played cricket to be a leader and captain, in a lot of teams as well. So, that really helps working with others, things like teamwork. It certainly builds a lot of resilience. And cricket, if you're playing a full season as a batsman in particular, you might come home from a day's play fully satisfied 3 to 5 times a year, because you always want more. Even if you make 100, you want 150.
Right. Sure.
So, it certainly teaches you, to have really, be really resilient, working well with other teammates,
right.
Understanding that, you're not going to be best mates with everyone, but you still need to deliver, some tough messages. And as long as you have, you do build a stronger relationship as possible, then, those messages can be given respectfully, but, have that mutual respect there. So, I think the life lessons you learn as a professional athlete definitely translate to everything you do post that time. Right,
because it's incredible when doing research, so many people talk about you as a leader, and it's really is. Did it start from a young age?
Good question. I was captain of my sporting teams when I was younger, but I don't know if that was maybe during that period. It was sometimes the better players just were given the captaincy.
Yeah, of course.
So, but I was given those opportunities, and it certainly helped, even at underage level, like Victoria under 17s and under 19s, and I think those experiences you learn from mistakes that you make, but you also have coaches and mentors that can guide you in the right direction. I was lucky enough to have people within that cricket system really guiding me and helping me there as well. Yeah.
Right, and fast forward to now. Obviously, your playing days are a bit behind you. Sadly, it happens to every one of us. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing today, because it is still related to cricket, but it really is very exciting.
Yeah, so I'm head of male cricket at Cricket New South Wales, overseeing all New South Wales programs, the 2 BBL teams, Sixers and Thunder.
Right.
And now we've just developed a partnership with Washington Freedom, which is a new league starting up. Called Major League Cricket in America. So I've been asked to sort of be the GM at cricket for that franchise and run all cricket related. Whether it's getting the list management, so local US players, overseas players, staffing, and also being involved in some other areas that commercial and sponsorships, and helping them with that as well. So it's opened my eyes to a very to I suppose bit more outside of just high performance sport, which has been really interesting.
Right.
And working with different stakeholders. So that's really exciting as well.
Yeah. And one of the things also is you've traveled a lot, and you've lived in a lot of places, and you continue to travel. Tell us a little bit about your travel schedule, but more what we want to know is how do you manage?
Yeah. For me, it's important around having a home base. And the last 2.5 years, I haven't had that, because I've been based a lot in Sydney, and my family, my wife and 3 kids are based in Melbourne. So I've been commuting a lot, and just recently, obviously spoken to Cricket New South Wales about that and how we can hopefully help that going forward. And luckily, this Washington Freedom, that this role has come up, which has probably meant I've done, almost like a 1.5 role for the last 4 months, because it's just been doing everything. And we've been able to restructure a role where I'm more T20 specialist now, so the 2 BBL teams in Washington Freedom, and part of that allows me to be based in Melbourne and travel to Sydney at once every few weeks rather than being there every week. So it certainly helps lifestyle wise and gives me more time at home and be able to do little things that I wasn't able to do for a while, take the kids to their sports after schools or be here every weekend, and so that's pretty exciting now to be able to do that.
Yeah, and have you struggled, because I know that so many people do with careers, balancing everything at the same time, and on top of it you have the geographic issues?
I think as a family we deal with it pretty well. It's probably just because it's what we've always known. So when I met Cindy, I was a professional cricketer. She, when we were married, I was a professional cricketer. When we had kids, so there was always travel involved, where there was interstate, UK for the winter. So I used to spend 6 months in the winter, but the family came across for the first 3 or 4 years of that, because the kids weren't at school yet. They were young. Once the kids started to go to school, I reduced those contracts to shorter periods, to a couple months at a time. But I was away 8 to 10 weeks still without seeing the kids and family. So we sort of, as a family, we it's all we know.
I see.
There may be a time down the track where it may be different, and I can be solidly based here. And but for now, the opportunity Cricket New South Wales have given me to the role I've done the last 2.5 years, and then the role going forward has been too good opportunity professionally, and I'm enjoying it, and I think this new structure will make it work really well.
Right. So Cindy, your lovely wife, this is what she's always known.
With me, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so she's she's been an amazing support for me, like from day one. When we first met, actually, I was in and out, and I wasn't the Victorian team. I wasn't playing. I was still professional, like I was still contracted, but I was in and out of the team a lot. So she went through that frustration with me, like not playing, and then we moved to Adelaide. We had 5 years in Adelaide, 6 years in Adelaide, 5 years in Perth, and then another 5 or 6 winters in Gloucestershire, which is in Bristol in the UK. So a lot of travel during that time, and for her to support me with that and travel with me for almost everything until we had kids that were at school age, was an unbelievable support. Yeah, no, it sounds incredible. I'm sure there were some amazing highs and periods where you wanted to throw something against the wall and everything in between. Yeah, or maybe Cindy wanted to throw me against the wall some of those times when I was traveling. But it's it was a lot of highs, and something I really appreciate being able to do for a long time. You get your lows, from a professional sport perspective all the time. But it's something I do look back on, and I'm sure in the future we'll look back on really fondly. Yeah, absolutely. But again, transitions. Cindy had some health issues. Can you just tell us a little bit about what happened, and what are your first thoughts, especially when you're balancing that your career is on the road? Yeah, sure. So we were living in Perth at the time, and Cindy had a sore back for a while, and so we booked into a doctor to go get a cortisone injection, and thinking she had a joint issue or something like that. And obviously before you get a cortisone, you get an MRI scan so they know exactly where to inject, and so she had all that done, and we got a call basically saying you got to come back in. There's something that's shown up on your scan that we need to talk to you about. So on the back of thinking you're going to go in to get a cortisone injection, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So the tumours had spread to from her breast, was breast cancer, to her spine and her neck. So it was certainly a huge shock for us, and being on the other side of Australia as well wasn't easy with our family. But they, within the space of I think less than 24 hours, her parents came over, my dad came over, and obviously from there it was a really difficult for her in particular, but obviously the whole family. 6 months of very aggressive treatment, and I think more just the shock of it happening from a sore back to that.
Sure.
So there was aggressive treatment involved, operations, but thankfully, after all that and a really difficult 12 months or so, we were able to get to a point where she's in good health now. Obviously regular checkups and regular treatment, but able to live a normal lifestyle. So which is really everyone's very thankful for.
Yeah, and I'm sure when you're going through it, we've had some experiences where you're not thinking that much, you're just more acting and doing and what needs to be done. But looking at it now, do you just feel like it's amazing, or just how, on one hand, I guess lucky, unlucky, you could say, what are your thoughts now at this point?
Yeah, it's interesting because I probably sway a bit, and I think Cindy does as well. You think she was 35 at the time, she's extremely young, so why me or why her?
Yeah, sure.
And so I think from that side, I think, well, it's extremely unlucky. There's no history in her family or anything like that with it. So you think, why?
Yeah, no predictability.
And then other ways you think, well, it could have gone a very different way if the treatment didn't work. So you think, how lucky you are in that situation. So you sway a bit with that. But, it's been, sort of 5 years sort of since then now, and she's in good health, living a normal lifestyle. Still, there's still appointments and checkups and treatment and things that happens regularly. But it's given me a new appreciation. I knew how tough she was and how resilient she was before that, and for her to go through what she's had to and still do what she does with our family and our kids in particular is pretty amazing. Yeah,
and any words about how to talk to children that inevitably are going to come into that same situation?
Yeah, it's really to this day I have to say it's the most difficult thing I've ever had to do, we have had to do. And we had children at the time was 3, 4, and 1, or 4, 5, and 1. So our youngest obviously didn't understand.
Doesn't know,
So our family started to come over, and we knew they'd think something was up.
Right.
So we told them in a way that we thought was right. We don't know if we got it right. We don't, because basically they associated the word with cancer with dying, because my mum passed away of pancreatic cancer when she was 55. I was in my early 20s, so they knew that, and they never met her, and so they knew. We told them the story. So the first thing when we said it to them was they just burst out crying, because they associated the word cancer with dying. So, it took us a few minutes to calm the situation down and explain to them that, mum's going to get some strong medicine, and that medicine's going to help her get better. And Cindy was, she's the one who took control of saying that. And I think once that happened, then it calmed down the situation, and they saw their mum getting sick, and but we kept saying, that's going to happen, but the end result's going to be, mum's going to get better, and thankfully it did. So that's still I don't think there's anything harder than that.
No. Definitely. And Cindy, hopefully you're watching. Incredible.
Yeah.
So, going through all that, I'm curious, because you go from, say, like when you're very, very little, you certainly must have been a superstar, and really just having this kind of walk on of just success after success after success. Going through something like that with Cindy, did that just completely change your mindset, or was there anything you can draw on? Because it's very hard to prepare for something that's almost unpreparable, I say.
Yeah, it certainly gives you a new appreciation on things. There's no doubt about that. But this was Cindy's sort of directive is what she wanted was life to go on as normal. So for example, when that happened, I retired a couple months early from cricket. I was going to retire at the end of that season anyway.
Right.
So this happened in start of December, and then I retired in start of February.
Right.
But I still have one more tournament to play in the UK.
In the UK, so
yeah,
around the world.
So the aim was, and which Cindy really drove, was I'm going to have my 6 months of chemo. The results are going to come back well, and then I want you to go play, because that's normal for us. You'll be away for 7 or 8 weeks, but that's normal for us, and it'll make the kids think, that everything's going back to normal, which is what she wanted. So, during the treatment, we didn't know what was going to happen there. I had to be at home with and that's why I retired a couple months early,
right.
because with her tumours in her back and neck, she wasn't able to pick anything up because there was a risk of she had 3 crushed vertebrae, so the risk of something worse happening, and then potentially causing paraplegic and that sort of stuff.
Right.
So I had to be home. She couldn't even lift like a bowl or a pot or something like that. And we had, as I said, a lot of help from her parents who stayed there for months on end. We had someone helping us with the kids. Support from the community was unbelievable.
Really? Okay.
Food rosters and everything set up for.
I was going to ask you,
so.
Did you think? My question was going to be, did you think about coming back to Melbourne? But I suppose not.
We didn't, only because the doctor that we got put in touch with there was absolutely amazing.
Right. And
she was very comfortable with her, and we didn't want to move for that reason. But the Perth community was unbelievable, both cricket, so the WACA, Western Australian Cricket Association, and the the Jewish community were. We'd been there for 4 years, and the support we got from them was second to none. So we'll forever be grateful to them as well.
Yeah. Speaking of the Jewish community, can you just talk about, you've been around the world. I assume that you've met Jews everywhere. Can you just talk about what does it mean to be Jewish?
I always go back up when someone asks me this, and I go back to, this is probably going a bit away from the question.
Sure.
A sport teacher I had at Mount Scopus, his name was Ray King.
Right.
And he was, he'd been to war for, Australia. He wasn't Jewish. He's furthest thing from being Jewish as possible. Very Australian, very, huge into his sport and footy and everything. And he stood up one day at an assembly on Anzac Day, and I remember it clearly, he talked about how lucky we are to be Australian, and to be in a country that's free. And then he finished up saying, and what you also should be most proud and lucky of is that you're Jewish.
Really? And
I found that it always sticks in my head. So I'm not a religious person, but I'm really proud of my heritage, and it comes back from my my grandparents going through the Holocaust and wars they're getting through, and providing our family an opportunity to do what we do now. And what I do really appreciate, and a lot of other sports people may not understand this, but you have your support crew and you have people who support you, but I have thousands of others during my cricket career where I'd get messages from people from the Jewish communities in Melbourne or wherever else.
Randos.
And I was lucky enough to debut for Australia in Melbourne at the MCG, and it was on a Friday night, and there was a huge group of people who met at Corford Shul and walked to the MCG to come and watch my game, like those who keep Shabbat, and so I don't know how many, but there would have been probably 2,000 extra people that came to that game, I think, because I was debuting. Maybe Cricket Australia picked me just so they could get a bigger crowd, I don't know.
Times are tough, Cricket Australia.
So it was, and I understood that, and it's something I'm always appreciative of, and I still, and that's why now I'm trying to give back as much as possible to the community, to Jewish sport.
Right.
Even in little ways, like I'm coaching my youngest Oz kick on a Sunday morning, under 7s Oz kick. I want to get involved, with them going forward as well. So I spoke at a Maccabi luncheon the other day, so I want to try and sort of pay back as much as possible, because I was certainly appreciative of all the support I had.
So you recognized it, even
100%, yeah.
So, Michael, I want to take a sharp turn here now and talk about competition, and because there's competition on the field, but there's competition in life and everywhere. And my question is, one of the most powerful forces in the world, or if not the, is momentum, in my opinion. And what do you do? Inevitably, there are going to be periods of a game. Even we were watching the Collingwood game, I believe it was on Sunday, and there was no game goes in a straight line, even there where the score really wasn't in doubt. But there are times and flows. How do you handle negative momentum? Like, what is your mindset around that?
I think the most important, this is for me, what worked for me. Everyone would work, would have different ways of helping them, but my biggest strength as a professional sportsman, as a cricketer, was my focus.
Right.
And I think that's, you talked around momentum in a footy game the other day, and did Carlton potentially lose their total focus only for 5 minutes? Did they get distracted by something else? I don't know the answer to that, but
neither do I.
Often that's all it takes. Once you lose absorbing yourself fully into that contest for a short period of time, that can be the difference between winning and losing.
Right.
And I can only go by my example, but we chatted about this earlier, I certainly wasn't the most talented, cricketer going around, but the likes of your David Warners and these guys, Glenn Maxwell's, and these guys could hit the ball further, could do a lot more than I could do. But what I felt I had on above almost every cricketer in Australia was I was able to absorb myself into the contest almost all the time, and my concentration and my focus was stronger than others, and I think that's important, in not only in sport, in anything. Like if you go into your workplace in the office and you're not switched on that day, you're not going to you're not going to get the work done that you need to. You're not going to be efficient in what you do. But you need to be able to know when to switch on and to know when to focus, because if you're not, I certainly don't believe in anything you do, sport or you can have sustainable success in your chosen environment.
Yeah, because one of the things that so many businesses deal with, and I'm not saying that just even the typical cyclicality, but is this momentum where it feels like you'll win a whole bunch of deals in a row, lose a whole bunch of deals in a row. How to keep that team focused when it's not going really well. Do you have also an underlying belief that it will change at some point in time?
Yeah, I think, and it's almost about wrestling back that momentum in a game of cricket or footy as well, or business, and how you're going to do it. So it might be, setting new objectives, or it might be setting new goals for whether it's your business or your sporting team. And sometimes that has to happen pretty quickly. Like in a sporting match, that has to happen during a game sometimes to be able to wrestle that back. In business, you've probably got a bit more time to do it strategically. So, but you need to do it, otherwise it goes in a downward spiral. So I think cricket, I keep going back to cricket, but it's a really great example now. The landscape's changing really quickly. So, the T20 franchise cricket's getting bigger and bigger around the world. And if you're not getting involved in it, you're going to fall off the cliff. And it's really important, I think, for Cricket Australia and other international bodies to start working with the Indians and the T20 franchise cricket and getting involved in it and finding a way to make it work rather than trying to fight against it. And that's sort of what I'm talking about, what I mentioned before. Yeah,
and I think that even adding to it, not just cricket, but the only thing that changes is change, so to speak. In so many businesses, you see the legacy, what worked 20 years ago, or in our case, maybe even 5 years ago, just doesn't work anymore, does it?
Oh, definitely. Like, look through during COVID and the change and what was the buzzword? Pivot.
Yes.
Everyone's talking about how they're going to pivot and go, make it work for them. And, the companies that were successful then did that really well. Right.
Hey, Michael, over the next 5 years, what would be for you your definition of success? Like, what is it that you're looking to do?
That's a good question. I'm really enjoying staying in sport administration. Okay. I had a taste of coaching for a couple of years after cricket. So I probably should have mentioned earlier around when I was playing cricket, I built up my CV from a coaching perspective and a sport administration perspective because I didn't know exactly while I was playing which way to go. I dabbled in coaching, but I always knew in the back of my mind I wanted to get into high performance management, whether that was cricket or business. So I'd certainly like to keep working in that industry in high performance management, high performance leadership. Whether it's in sport in 5 years' time, I don't know. Whether it's in business or something completely different. Sometimes I think, it'd be nice to do something completely different away from sport. But
the statistics say you will, by the way.
Yeah, potentially. But I also I always reckon because I've got that competitive streak in me, I'd be drawn back. So if I did find something, outside of professional sport, it would, for me, to keep the juices going, I suppose, it would have to have some sort of competitive nature to it, for me to be really, to get fully involved in it. So yeah, I think I'd love to stay in high performance management, whether that's sport or something else. But from a wider perspective, I'd just like to share, some really good experience with my family. Travel when I can take some leave away from work, and whether that's overseas or locally. I've got bar and bat mitzvah coming up this year for my 2 older kids, and my youngest is sport crazy, as I mentioned earlier, so to be involved with him as well. So those things are really important to me because, as you mentioned earlier, the travel I've had to do and I've been away for a lot of it. So where I can, I'm certainly want to try to put back in some time there as well to Cindy and the kids.
Excellent. Michael, thank you so much. There's so much here, the highs, the lows, there's so many lessons, incredible story. We will definitely be following you, and will the entire diaspora.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.